firstly just introduce myself. So my name's Rachel Sara. I'm Professor of Architecture in the School of Architecture and Design, and also National Teaching Fellow. And just because we're swapping the mics, I'll introduce Matthew Jones, who is our head of School of Architecture and Design. And we've been working on the kind of really exciting projects over quite a few years, really, bringing together, connecting universities and communities. And we've begun to explore this kind of idea through this STEAM concept. And we're testing out the idea that we want to explore the idea of co-STEAM. Of course, inherent in STEAM is already this idea of collaboration, but also we're introducing this notion of the community being important. So we're going to introduce the work we've been doing connecting communities, both with architecture and design students and practitioners, and we're using co-design tactics to develop regenerative strategies, projects, really moving beyond university outreach and engagement to instead position the university as an agent of change. And this is something that we have been involved in a number of different ways over time.
So as Rachel said, the Birmingham School of Architecture and Design has a long history of working through hands-on making and working with communities. This is an example of a conglomerate build completed by our students in the 1960s. And over the 50s and 60s, there are a number of live projects actually constructing buildings out in the community. During the 90s, this sort of resurfaced as an idea about engaging with communities in workshops through participation. And today we do this through a module that all of our second year undergraduates and first year postgraduates take, which is called CoLab, the Collaborative Laboratory. And this is an example of one of the projects, which is a group of students working with artist Kay Winwood around a sensory designing experience where they designed everything from the food to the setting to the curation of the experience. And I think increasingly within these projects we're starting to see the projects through CoLab engaging much more with issues of sustainability and beyond sustainability, really reflecting on some of the urgent calls for change coming out of, for example, the UN Habitat Programme, and really starting to think about how we can engage with communities to explore these wicked problems, as they were called earlier, around climate change and biodiversity loss.
So that really comes from the principle of that research, which is that really to re-empower communities and promote participatory democracy is part of designing sustainable futures. And that's kind of driving some of the intention behind what we've been doing. So I, and often in collaboration with Matt, have been working for over 20 years on these kind of projects, which invite communities to become part of the process of knowledge generation that we kind of consider to be the university environment. So that is sometimes and often about taking students out into communities. It's about bringing communities into part of the university, but also really reconfiguring where the learning happens and understanding the learning as co-produced through that relationship between communities and societies. So I set up with colleagues this form of engagement called Hands-on Bristol in my previous post. Here at BCU, I run a unit in the Master of Architecture for Master's students, which is Extinction Rebellion Architecture, which is really about connecting through radical engagement with communities. And there's the previously spoken about CoLab, Collaborative Laboratory, which is an ongoing kind of process of engagement across disciplines. It involves interior architecture, landscape architecture, product design, design for future living students, often working with external partners. And in fact, the very roots of STEAM itself came from a project that was set up by my colleague Alessandro Colombano, who set up the very initial kind of ideas of how the STEAM project might happen through a project over in, it was East Side Projects?
Yeah.
So sometimes these projects get realised. So this was a project that we we realised in Bristol. I'm laughing because I'm remembering that there's a mat hidden in one of the photographs. So it's like Where's Wally? You can have a mat in the photograph. So this is one of the projects which was one of those community connected projects that was kind of co-constructed between community members, students and professional architects, as well as makers. And this ended up in this kind of small pocket park, which is now a kind of community-run pocket park in Bristol. But the other thing is that it connects between our research world and our teaching world, really bringing teaching and research together. So it's part of the Urban Cultures Research Cluster on the left. That collab on the right is kind of connected with teaching as well as research and practice. And then it also feeds into the Centre for Towns Research and the research that we're doing around the future, thinking about the future high street. So I guess, as I said, we're making this kind of case for the idea that co-STEAM might be about university civic collaboration, co-design processes, really long-term thinking and imagination in nurturing regenerative futures for our towns and cities.
Okay, so we're just going to quickly talk through one example of this idea, which is a collaboration that we've been running since about 2020 with a social innovation lab on Dudley High Street called CoLab Dudley. And this has gone through a number of stages of this project, starting out as a collab. So what we were looking at with this project was asking students to explore regenerative futures for Dudley High Street, to look at working very closely with the project partners through co-design processes to understand the high street, albeit virtually in this case, because we were teaching online at this point, and also to then take their research, explore possible futures for the place, and then design projects that could be stepping stones towards that potential future. And all the way through were these touching sort of collaboration points with CoLab Dudley, where they were bringing their expertise and network into the projects. They were amplifying and growing the students' work and really helping them to explore regenerative futures in a very open and participatory way. So CoLab Dudley, this is their shop front on the high street. They have this huge network of collaborators working in and around Dudley, really coming from multiple discipline backgrounds, artists, geographers, members of the council and so forth within this group. What we asked the students to do was initially try and understand the high street, to understand the challenges that it was facing and the opportunities, and to create these visual representations of what they were finding that could then be shared with CoLab Dudley. We then asked them to create a gift for the high street, so something that picked up on their research and what was emerging from their analysis, and make something that revealed something that might be overlooked or forgotten, or tried to bring out into the open an idea that the students were exploring. So that might have been casting Victorian railings, or the idea of food and growing, or this layering of the high street on the right. So this was a really key point in the project, because it was really the moment where CoLab Dudley and their network connected with us and our students in a really exploratory way. So they made really strong connections through what they called human library, connecting individual projects with a poet, with an artist, with community members, to explore a two-way dialogue around the themes that were being developed. So really then we asked students to look 10 years into the future and to develop this idea of what the high street could be like, and to explore thinking from, for example, Rob Hopkins' From What Is to What If, as a way to explore narrative thinking through their projects, and ultimately come up with a series of regenerative visions, working in groups, and the stepping stones to get to that vision. So this is a project called My Street 2030, looking at growing, well-being, rewilding and pedestrianisation as the principles of their project.
And the nice thing about working across different university modules is that we can provide some kind of continuity with that engagement. So when we're working with partners, we can pick up different connections in a different way. And so after that initial collab project, we then picked up a project where we collaborated through the Extinction Rebellion Architecture Masters Studio that I was talking about, to continue to explore a lot of the same themes. We did a process of zooming in and zooming out, so looking at climate catastrophe issues and testing those out, and not testing them solely, but also understanding them, I suppose, in a very local context. So translating things to very, very immediate understandings for and with community groups. And one example of those is that we calculated that the energy embodied in Dudley's High Street is the equivalent to 40,000 trees, or what would be absorbed in carbon by 40,000 trees. So really initial ideas kind of were about nurturing trust, part of the collaboration, really founding on the established relationships that have been built up through the previous work. And there's a kind of generosity in the collaboration, so again, initiated this similar idea to the gift, but this time it was very much engaging in the public as part of a market stall through a really interactive exhibition. And so on the right, people were asked to record, make a flower commemorating one of the 173 excess deaths caused by air pollution annually in Dudley alone. So that really raised awareness about issues in a very kind of local context. We kind of work in explicitly circular and regenerative approaches, and really testing ideas across climate agendas. And you can see this really exploring societal challenges, fundamental to the STEAM agenda around things around food poverty, air quality, biodiversity, energy security, and so on. There's so much more. And what we ultimately reflected on, I suppose, is that the project sort of takes on agendas of STEAM, but also perhaps argues a kind of shift. And so we tried to kind of conceptualize what we thought maybe the first understanding of STEAM was, which there's this connection between enterprise and business and the university. That STEAM House sits in the middle of this kind of connection, that it's maybe multidisciplinary, involves collaboration and design thinking, and it brings together these people, makers, creative programmers, academics, artists, businesses, so on. It brings together all these different kinds of folks. And we kind of argued for a shift to really emphasize the power of working with communities. And so this shift adds that additional kind of third element to those enterprise, business, university, and community. And then kind of shifts, therefore, the thinking to be really much more about transdisciplinary instead of interdisciplinary, about participation in more than just collaboration, and about systemic design thinking around this kind of big outer kind of agenda of societal issues.